13.2 Developing a Thesis. Your work to analyze and synthesize texts as you read has prepared you to write your analytic exploration, and it has laid the groundwork for the thesis that will serve as your frame. The next two steps in the process of constructing the analytic exploration are to develop a thesis and to outline the paper. Your thesis and outline will be submitted as part of your Project 2 packet. Developing a thesis. You have collected, compiled, cultivated, and curated content for use in your analytic exploration. Now you will bring your findings together into a thesis. Writing that is solely derivative can start with a developed thesis, but writing that includes primary research, whether derivative or original, is framed around a hypothesis that is tested or a research question that is answered. The thesis is dependent upon the result, so the thesis cannot be determined until the research is conducted, which is why a research question, hypothesis, or working thesis is used to guide the work. In our case, you cannot state the finding of synthesizing the three analyses and the popular and primary sources until you've done the analytic work. You might have found that the three academic sources agree and that the public source frames a public understanding that aligns with the academic findings. But that is unlikely because while replication studies can be published, most academic content that is published in research journals moves the conversation forward with new or different findings. Perhaps you found that your three academic sources each advance the work, but that the public information is based on a misunderstanding of the work or on dated findings. Perhaps you found that the three academic articles present conflicting perspectives on the topic, and that the debate is mirrored in the public conversation. Also consider how your survey data rounds out your thesis. Perhaps you found that your limited sampling suggested that people are generally well informed on the topic and express a consensus around a major perspective on the subject. Or perhaps you found no such thing. Regardless, state what you found in the section of your analytic exploration dedicated to your primary source content, and don't forget to include some element of it in your thesis. Given your 6 main sources, 3 academic, 2 popular, 1 primary, when you look at a one-sentence summary of each, what connections do you see across the sources, and how can you synthesize these into a thesis? The thesis shouldn't try to do too much, so it could be as simple as stating that there is or isn't an agreement across the sources. Or it could state that within the conversation, 2 main perspectives appear. Or it could state that while multiple perspectives were represented in the academic research, only one perspective was established in the public sources, and that it was echoed in the survey data. Then the rest of the introduction would explain the different conversations and which sources represented each. A great way to develop a thesis is by writing a one-sentence summary for each of the sources you plan to synthesize, and looking at all 6 together in search of patterns and connections. Writing a strong and clear thesis takes multiple revisions. To start, try to get the content together into a few sentences and see how you can address all the connections in one paragraph. Both academic and popular sources address the topic of breast cancer. Specifically, the question of when women should get a mammogram is contested in both academic and public conversations. Although there is agreement on the importance of screening in the prevention of breast cancer, an analysis of academic sources and public sources reveals conflicting findings that result in a mixed advice on how often and when women should have mammograms. The lack of agreement continues into the question of which type of mammogram is best. The confusion is mirrored in public opinion that reveals a range of perspectives and practices around screenings. That is a very good start, but it really expands into an introductory paragraph, so some of it can be moved into the context section that follows. Or perhaps your conversation also looked at breast cancer, but focuses on the causes. Your thesis might look something like this. Recent findings agree that the early arguments suggesting diet as the main source of breast cancer were limited and flawed. However, they do not agree on the main causes which support for genetics, lifestyle, and access to healthcare, each receiving support. The sample shows a more concise thesis sentence that still develops the synthesis of sources. Connecting 2 sentences into one thesis statement is one way to clarify more extensive information, but again, be sure not to try to do too much. Submitting your working thesis will allow you to share your thesis with your peers and review their edits, which can help everyone clarify a thesis. Assignment 13.2. To prepare for your outline, write a thesis statement that synthesizes your 3 academic articles, your 2 popular sources, and your primary research. Then write an edited and improved version of the same statement and explain what was changed, why it was edited, and the impact of the modification.